Hey, it takes all time. It's good to...
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order the January 7th, 2026 Council Work Session. And we'll be discussing two items, the 2026 to 2030 Capital Improvement Plan and the fiscal year 2026 budgetary goals. And with that, Terry, if you want to go ahead and carry it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Most of this presentation is going to be done by staff, but we're here to, answer any questions that we can. So I think we're going to start with the capital plan, and I'll turn that over to our Public Works Director, Mr. Fry.
Thank you. So, as Mr. Eubanks said, we will be going over the capital improvement plan. This is for fiscal year 27 through 31. I know there was an error on the agenda there. So, CIP for capital plan 27 through 31. So, capital project for City of Kenai is a one-time expenditure in excess of $35,000, typically with something that's over a useful life of a year. So this is a planning document essentially for City of Kenai to project out for the next 5 years, major capital projects that helps us work through our budgeting process as well as we're trying to figure out, large projects coming down the pipeline as well as what we're budgeting for this year. So main thing to keep in mind when we're reviewing this is most of the projects that are in our fiscal year 27 are projects that we're expecting to put in our budget for this year when we're coming forward with the budgeting process here in a couple months. Everything that's further out from there is more for planning phases at this time. They're projects that we've identified, but as it's a planning document, these can always change from year to year, so other items might get pushed back or moved up as we see priorities change as we move forward in the timeline. So with that said, I'll start jumping into the specific projects here. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me, ask anything. Otherwise, I'll just kind of be jumping through here. So first is the airport fund. Most of what's on the airport fund comes from our airport capital improvement plan that gets approved through the FAA. They have a 3-year plan that they review every year for that. So these projects are pretty much flowing in line with that. A lot of what we do with the airport fund is doing design projects up front to get everything ready, and then we bid them out for construction, and that's when we actually get the FAA money. So you see some kind of weird flows in the money on these projects. So our first project that we have listed here is the taxiway design. So we already have $650,000 appropriated for that project that's being designed. But the construction isn't projected until FY28, and that's when would be anticipating receiving the grant funding for that project to move forward. So we typically do all the design, environmental review, develop the documents, put it out to bid. Once we have that firm construction cost, that's when we then request the money from the FAA to move forward with the project. But we've been in conversation with them the whole time, developing all that and making sure they understand what's coming. So all the projects that are on here are moving in that way. The only things that we don't have on there, I'll get into when we get down there. But taxiway, ABCDE, KLM, that's a project that we're currently working on design for, is the next major project after we do the runway design. Perimeter security fence line improvements as well. We have that project going on design right now and have already appropriated some money. We are expecting to bid that out this summer so that we can get construction working on that as well. So what you're seeing there is the grant funding that we would be needing to approve that project after we get construction bid. Moving forward as well, into FY28, float basin, taxiway, Sierra, and access control lighting. Next project, just more taxiways on that project. You can see the descriptions further on in there. Runway marking is something we knew that we've added to the airport fund. We've put that in FY28 and FY30. Typically, in the past, the FAA has not covered repainting our runways and doing all the markings that are required for the airports. As FAA funding, but that is changing, so we have identified that as a project on there that's not currently on our airport capital improvement plan, but something that we wanted to identify for the future. In addition, we've also added the airport broom replacement. That's replacing a broom that's used for snow removal that's getting to the end of its useful life. In the terminal road and parking lot improvements is a project that we've added on here. And you can see in number 11 on FY29, we have less grant funding for that one than city funding. FAA is only expected to cover the terminal road itself. They won't pay for any of the parking lot improvements on that project. So we are expecting to spend more city funding and get less FAA grant funding for that project. We also have number 9 down in FY29 is moving forward to airport apron expansion toward the east end of the airport and Willow Street extension to improve commercial development along the airport over in that direction. The ARF building is getting toward the end of its 30-year useful life of that roof, so we've got that identified on here moving forward. It seems to be performing fairly well right now, so we're not seeing any issues with it, but we just have it identified right now as a expected timeline needing replacement. And then moving forward, these are in the FY30 and FY31 are projects that aren't are much more fluid with FAA's design process and getting into their capital planning. So some of these projects could be expected to shift in the future. Taxiways for FJ and the general aviation apron, taxiway GHJ and the city apron design. Those projects are looking at expanding out some of the floatplane basin, more things out there, improving general aviation for the airport, but could, again, be expected to shift in the future. And an ARF vehicle that we have identified out there in the future. We tried to do that one earlier, but we're not currently eligible for replacement of our ARF vehicle at this time. So we're pushing that out and expecting that to be replaced in the future. So any other questions on airport? I don't know if Mary's here either. Mary?
Any council questions? Zavala?
Thanks, Lee. Just curious on what's the age of that, I just closed the document, hold on. The ARF building roof currently.
It would be about 30 years old at that time, so I believe it was built in 90 or 92. That's about the correct time.
Okay. And what type of roof is it? Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, getting my math wrong, sorry. 30 years,
hold it
not
against
40
you.
years.
I was wondering if there's anybody from the audience that might have a question. I see the airport chair is here too. Just to give anyone an opportunity before we move on. Seeing none. Go ahead, Mr. Fry.
Okay, I will move on to the general fund. Okay, so a couple things I want to point out in the general fund at the start here. In the CIP packet, we eliminated the senior fund this year. Essentially, everything in the senior fund is funded by the general fund. So we eliminated the senior fund portion of the CIP package here for the 5-year, and it's all those projects that were on there have just been incorporated in there. So that goes for anything that was approved by the Council on Aging, has essentially just been rolled into the general fund and isn't in its own separate area on here. The other breakout that I have is we have specific road projects identified here for each fiscal year. The way we've gotten these road projects is we're currently finishing up the street condition assessment, and I'm expecting that to come in front of council here the next month or so. But I have a draft version of that document that we've essentially identified the roads that are the highest priority, and we've punched those in here on the years to complete those projects. So that's where the priorities are coming from, where we're starting with Willow and Airport and then moving on to Lawton and Tinker and Swires. So we'll have more information on that. To give kind of a brief rundown on it, essentially what we did with the street condition assessment is we had people, our consultant came up here, so they walked all the streets in town. They did what's called a pavement condition index rating on each of our roads. So they took multiple ratings in different spots on the road, averaged those ratings out to kind of determine what the quality of the road is. On average, right now, all of our asphalt streets are at a 76 rating, so a 71 to 85 is satisfactory. That's out of 100. So what we're punching in here is essentially to maintain that existing 76 rating kind of throughout our city. So we're trying to just maintain the status quo of the existing quality of our asphalt. We could put in more money, and we could try to up that quality. But if we don't start spending, about what we have projected here, essentially the quality of the asphalt throughout town is just going to slowly grade over time. So that's what we're aiming for in this plan to try and move forward. If that makes sense. If anybody has any questions, let me know. And with that, I'll kind of jump into it. So Willow and Airport Way is the top priority project here. I'm sure as people have noticed driving through Willow before you get to where it was previously paved over by the airport, is deteriorating pretty rapidly. The seams between the asphalt panels are getting pretty bad. It's almost the exact same situation on Airport Way. So we're going to target that right now we would be doing design starting this summer, and that would be summer of '27. We would actually be doing construction on that one. So we're just getting that in there in the plan now to construction and design funding so that we can move forward with it and bid it out next winter where we'd already have the funding away to award that project. The next project is a comprehensive plan. Director Buettner has wanted to add that project in here, and he can answer additional questions if we have it. We are anticipating possibly getting some funding from the Kenai Peninsula Borough to help us complete that comprehensive plan for City of Kenai. Old Town Playground replacement. So this is a project that we revised a little bit on the schedule. What we're currently recommending is spending some design money right now to try and figure out what all we want to get down on that playground. The previous project showed kind of a phased construction and doing multiple improvements on that project. We're trying to scale it down a little bit to get something that's going to be more that we think we can afford to do, probably consisting of a new basketball court, new playground equipment, removing the fencing. So less grand than it was. We're not looking at probably doing full flush toilets and things like that at that playground anymore, which would be very expensive to install. But we're going to try and work through that as we do the design, work through it with the Parks and Rec Commission, and scope that out so that we can get a more accurate construction cost of what the community needs at that playground. Rec Center locker room refurbishment. They are looking at redoing a lot of the bathrooms there, plumbing fixtures, tiles, things like that. So Tyler has been working on that project. Gravel road improvements is spending some money just fixing up, essentially doing some topping on several of our gravel roads, fixing some low spots, adding some better road topping into several areas around town. Streetlight decorations was a project that the Parks and Rec Commission wanted to include this year. It wasn't previously on a capital improvement plan, but this is to purchase new streetlight decorations that would light up along the Kenai Spur Highway that hang out on the streetlight poles that you see throughout town in the winter. So a lot of those are just becoming in a state of disrepair, so this would be purchasing new fixtures for that. Senior Center door project is, we have some doors that are difficult to access through wheelchairs, interior of the building, so as well as some other just kind of access issues. It's not that they're not ADA compliant, but they are difficult to get through. So we are looking at trying to make some wider door openings and make those more improved there, as well as one exterior door that does need a replacement over there. Last project I wanted to add on 27, it's not listed here, but we have been having some discussions with the clerk's office about our AV system in this room, possibly having some issues, as many of you may have noticed in previous meetings. So we are working on scoping that out. We might add something to here before this gets approved through council. If not, it might be something that comes forward in the budgeting process as we're working it here. Moving on to FY28, big project here, obviously number 8. So this is kind of a placeholder right now with the public safety building replacement renovations. I plugged in the $35 million project cost essentially looking at if we were to build a whole new building for all of them. This is obviously just kind of a placeholder building as we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with the building, what we're going to do with police and fire, as we're looking at different options right now. And another thing to note is that we did change the heading on that, so it says grant and bond funding. I think we're kind of assuming right now that if we were to move forward with the project at this scope, that we might be asking a bond to complete one of these projects if it's going to be, 10, 20, $30 million range. So we're putting that on here as a placeholder. Want to definitely identify it as a potential huge cost in the future, depending how we end up on that project. Next major project for roads is Lawton, Tinker, and Swires. Tinker is definitely the high one on that list. Right when you come off the highway, it's in pretty poor shape. So that's the main of those three. Lawton also has several poor areas, but Tinker's the main area that's pretty poor rating right now as far as the asphalt goes. We discussed Old Town Playgrounds. City Hall improvements, we're working on some design for that right now with our architect firm, looking at exterior windows, doors, ADA access in the front, the elevator. So we'll have a little better cost scoped in that as we're moving forward here. But right now, that's just kind of a placeholder for the future as we go through that design process and see where we end up with what the architect recommends. Relocation of Parks and Rec to Dobbinspec is a project that's been on here to try and give Parks and Rec a better home for equipment and staff. Multi-purpose facility roof replacement, that's another just timeline of the roof, looking about that time that it's going to need to be replaced. And we do have some issues at that roof, depending on the weather. Stormwater improvements is a project that the main area we're looking at trying to figure out is some of the high groundwater we're seeing back in Inlet Woods, and potentially trying to construct some storm drain back in that area. We do get a lot of flooding in the back end of town, especially during breakup. The high groundwater table just, it's all dry wells back there, so none of the water gets to flow out to a storm drain system. It's all just absorbing into the ground. If anybody's seen the pond back there, you can see how high the water just kind of gets there, depending on the time of year. So we are reviewing options there to try and figure out how to add some piping and potentially better manage the stormwater in that area. Senior Center landscaping is a project that's been on here for a little while and has been shifted back. Now that the bluff is stabilization structure has been constructed, we expect to be moving forward with that one in the next couple of years here. We do want to make sure we're not putting any landscaping where something might fall off the edge there as the bluff continues to erode and stabilize. That's why it's been continued to push back as we try and waited for that project to get developed. South Spruce Street is the road heading down to the water treatment plant and the beach there. We do have some deteriorating conditions there. We did have a little bit of sloughage a couple years ago on there. We also have some culverts that are in poor shape. So that is being tackled there as a priority for us. Senior housing feasibility study was a project that was added last year at City Council's discretion when we discussed that and put that in there. We were expecting, we have shifted that entirely to city funding, not expecting to be able to find a grant for that. We will look for grants for that project, but we wanted to keep that on here as a priority for City Council. Landscaping, talk about everything there. Frontage Street, high priority for paving. That one's getting pretty deteriorated. I'm sure some people have known. It also got cut up a lot during the NSTAR project this last year. So moving forward there. And the last project we have identified for the road is First Avenue and Main Street. And FY31, we also had the senior center roof for replacement, starting the design on that. Any questions on the general fund?
Any questions from council?
I had a question about how prioritization is determined. For example, when I look at FY27, there's 7 projects listed. The 7th is the senior center door project, and the information in the packet indicates that though they're not an immediate health and safety issue, there's some egress and access issues. So I'm curious how that ends up at number 7. And I mean, I love the streetlight decorations, one of my most favorite things about driving through Kenai, but that's above, providing adequate access within the senior center to residents.
That's correct. So I try to put the larger projects higher up there, but I'm not sure if I would 100% say that this is a, number 1 to 7 priority list. We just kind of number the projects as we're going down through here, but I'm not sure if I would officially say that, I'm expecting to recommend all these projects are going into the budget unless city council wants to change something as we're moving forward in the budgeting process and review. So I'm prioritizing all these projects as going forward in the budget and not necessarily pulling one over the other.
Mr. Fry, didn't it say at the beginning of the document that they're not in any particular order for the year? I think it said that in the paragraph at the beginning.
It did, but something I heard you say when you were talking made me think that those numbers indicated prioritization. So that's why I was seeking clarification.
The roads projects are prioritized for sure. And that's why I have Willow and Airport as our highest priority road to be replaced. So I definitely prioritize the roads projects, but those are prioritized just in order of by the fiscal year. So I'm putting the higher needs ones first before going to the next deteriorated road.
Councilmember Casena?
Thank you. Lee, if it is incorporated, how are we incorporating the Parks and Rec master plan into the prioritization of those items?
Director Best might be able to handle that better. I believe that is still an ongoing project that they haven't finished. So right now we're moving, this is recommendations based on Parks and Rec Commission, but I can let Director Best answer to that.
Yeah, Director Fry said it correctly. That project's still ongoing and hasn't been adopted and drafted yet where it'd be incorporated in this. So I think like next year, you'd probably see some projects tying in with that plan.
Follow-up question, if you don't mind, Tyler. Do you have any idea of when you're expecting to have the master plan finalized?
We just received a draft from our consultant, and we're kind of working on cleaning that up, and then it would go forth to our commission here, probably in the next couple months, and then it would come forth to council, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your work on that.
Vice Mayor Askin, did you have something?
I did. Thank you, Mayor Nexted. Mr. Fry, the multipurpose facility, we're talking about the roof and then the refrigeration system. Is there any plans to close that in, or is it going to remain open like it is now?
Thank you. I forgot to speak about the refrigeration system. We currently do not have any plans to close that in. We have had, some minor discussions, I guess, about what that facility should be, what we should do with it as we get toward this end of life as a refrigeration system. So the number we plugged in here, which is a hefty number of over $5 million, is for replacement of the system to a CO2 system. And there's several different options to do that. It's going to be expensive to go and modify the existing facility to add the system in there. So I think it's going to be one of those things that we're going to have to scope a little more as we get closer to that time and figure out what the best use of that facility is and whether it makes sense to do that or look at other solutions.
Thank you.
Any further council questions? Councilmember Casena?
Yeah, thank you. Lawton repave. It looks like it just includes the paving of the street currently, but there's a ton of sidewalk off Lawton as well. Would or could the design include that and the repair of that sidewalk?
It would, yeah. At the time, we would definitely review all the sidewalk conditions, and if there's areas that are deteriorated, we would look at replacing those or fixing those at that time. And the Lawton portion that is being looked at here is just from, I'm blanking on the road, but it's just going west to Tinker or east to Tinker, so it's not extending past toward the golf course area.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I did have one, and it's probably premature, but the Challenger Center, obviously, we don't have a project we don't know what we're going to do with it, but we're going to be doing something. So how does that fit into our plan? Because I know we're going to be spending money in the next couple of years on it.
So I guess the way I'm looking at that is we do have some funding already set aside for the public safety building, and we're working with our architect on that project to get us a proposal for looking at the Challenger Center for one, the other, or both police and fire over there, see if that makes sense. So it could be a supplemental appropriation if we look at doing something like that. I guess the way I'm looking at that right now, at least on the fire and police side, is just plugging that project in as the FY28 possible project. If we look at doing something else like that, like selling it to another agency, then I don't think that would hit us as far as costs at this time. Do you have anything you want to add, Terry?
Thank you. Is there anybody from the audience that has any questions on the capital plan so far? Okay, go ahead and proceed.
So we will move on to water and sewer. A lot of similar projects to what we had on here before. I did move things around a little bit and combine some projects. So the first project we have here is the water mainline improvements. We are having some discussion with state and federal agencies about possibly getting some grant funds for this project. What we're looking at doing is helping fix some water quality issues we have throughout town. So we have several dead ends of our water system that we can't flush the lines. There's no fire hydrant at the end of the line. So typically when we do our flushing once a year, we can flush the lines, helps us maintain our water quality throughout the system. If we have a dead end and there's no hydrant there, we can't really do anything about it. Opening hose bibs on houses doesn't flow enough water to really make an improvement for them there. So we've identified a significant number of those, and this is a project to essentially add some of those hydrants so we can improve our flushing capabilities. It is also potentially looking at doing some looping of water mains. Just connecting one end to another will solve a lot of those issues because we can still flow hydrants and get water moving through those areas. So that's what we're looking at here is essentially a water quality improvement for various areas around City of Kenai. Next project we have identified is the airport reservoir pump house and tank improvements. The exterior insulation on the tank is getting pretty old and deteriorated, so that's a big part of this project is replacing the insulation. The other thing we want to do is look at redoing the inside of the pump house there, as well as some of the piping around the pump house. Right now our reservoir is one line in, one line out, and it creates some issues with our town with pressures and when we're trying to fill the tank versus drain the tank. So we want to review some options there to try and improve how that could flow and help some pressures and fire flows throughout town that can become an issue when we're trying to fill the tank or trying to drain the tank and we need to pump water for a fire emergencies. Utility trucks, pretty straightforward, just replacing a truck. Water effluent flow monitoring and auto dosing. We are looking at our equipment that we have that we use to gauge how much water is flowing through the treatment plant is getting pretty old, and we're having some trouble replacing some meters and various parts and pieces on that. So this is to replace that. We'd also like to tie some equipment to that. So the chlorine and bisulfite that we use to at the end of the treatment process, when it goes out into the inlet, we put the chlorine in it to clean it, and then the bisulfite to neutralize the chlorine before it goes out to the inlet. So this would tie it to that flow so that we're dosing based on flow and not just, right now it's kind of more of a process where we're trying to estimate it and gauge it, but we'd be able to save some money by being a little more, setting up that auto dosing system. The last project we have for next year is water meter equipment and software. We want to Right now, we do essentially hand counts of all our commercial water meters in town. Our guys have to go around and hand write everything down to do our billing process for commercial users that are metered. So this would be replacing the heads on those meters, and then we drive around with equipment and it automatically locates or records those meter readings for us so that we can do that billing. It'll help us catch errors quicker. It'll reduce errors by our staff if we're, miswrite a number down or somebody misreads it in finance when our utility guys transfer it to them. So hoping to fix and makes that process a little more efficient. Moving on, this project is kind of an add revision here. So the design project we have here is for wastewater treatment plant operations and headworks renovation, and it goes on with the construction project the following year that I'm recommending as a possible bond project. We had several projects here for redoing the influent manhole down there, how everything comes into the plant, redoing our bar screening system. We have some issues with our just aging building down there, and it's going to be difficult to do all these projects kind of in a one-off. I think it's going to be more efficient if we look at trying to set up a new influent process there, and then we can tie everything over at once it's all installed. Wastewater treatment plant's just notoriously hard to do because we can't shut the plant down. It has to keep running. Pipes keep coming, water keeps flowing. So that's the goal of that project, is to make some improvements down there so that everything's flowing a little better at the headworks operation before it moves on through the treatment. Next project is the disinfection generation equipment. We do already have some design funds appropriated to do some design on that. Essentially, that's just looking at creating our own chlorine on site instead of purchasing it in bulk like we do right now. Removes some of the handling and safety issues with handling bulk chlorine that our staff currently has to deal with. Vac truck replacement in FY28, fairly straightforward. FY29 is Florida Avenue water main. What we're looking at doing there is there's some existing 4-inch water mains on those streets that are served. And this would be putting a larger main in the middle to help serve them from a couple points so that we can keep water pressures higher in there. Our water pressure isn't great in that neighborhood. That was an old water system that the city inherited, so we're just trying to look to make some improvements to it. Broad Street Lift Station Generator. This is one of our main lift stations in town for wastewater. And when we lose power, it's pretty much the first one we go to get a generator on and make sure it's flowing so we don't have any sewer backups. So putting a generator out here would essentially just remove that concern, have a standard standby generator there at all times. So anytime we lose power, it's automatically working and we can worry about other issues with the power outage. And the FY31 projects are, these are essentially all projects that we've identified for some possible future economic development. What we're looking here is if we were to have the gas line go through, those types of things, we wanted to identify some projects that we see as big infrastructure improvements in town that could help us, expand water supply for housing, for fire flows, for if any other commercial needs that may develop. So Beaver Loop water main, the first one is essentially looking at putting a water main all the way through Beaver Loop, which will connect over to the water main we have off of Bridge Access Road. This would help with a lot of fire flows in there. Basically, all of our other water is coming through Kenai Spur Highway to get over to town. So it kind of gets distributed and goes through a couple pinch points with lower diameter water mains as it spreads across town. So helping us get a better supply over to the center of town from Beaver Loop would be a big improvement for the water system. That also goes similar with the Kenai Spur, Spruce to Forest. We only have 2 water mains that cross that bluff to get across. So the Spruce to Forest area, putting another water main through there would help us serve the west side of town better. Evergreen Street water and sewer mains is a project that we identified with the planning department. Evergreen Street goes about halfway to Redoubt Avenue from the spur, but there is some undeveloped lots on either side of the Evergreen Street right-of-way. So we see this as a possible development for the future. If we could get water, sewer, road down through that street, potentially it could help spur some development in that area as well. And the last project we have on there is the Marathon Willow Water and Street, water and sewer mains. We essentially have water and sewer kind of dead ending going up Marathon and going up Willow. It does cause some water issues and some poor water quality at the end of Willow Street heading out toward the airport. We get a lot of water hammer issues because it's just such a long dead end main. So looping that water through there would help with our water pressures, help with our water quality, as well as we think helping with some commercial development at the west side of the airport, or east side of the airport, that direction. So any questions before I?
Any questions on water and sewer? Councilmember Casina?
Thank you. I may have missed it, but does any of these projects help solve the coolest trick that you guys have at the water treatment plant, which is the air leak through the concrete and asphalt there?
The wastewater treatment plant, we're not losing any air at the water plant. So the wastewater plant, that project is going on right now. That's part of our digester blower project. So we're going through submittal phases for that right now, and that'll be under construction this summer. So that line that had the air coming out of it is essentially going to be decommissioned, left in place, and then we'll have new air coming from our new blowers in a separate building coming in a different direction.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? Just to be consistent, is there anybody from the audience that have any question? Okay, seeing none, Lee, right ahead.
We will move on to the Congregate Housing Fund, which is Vintage Point. So this is pretty straightforward to what we've done in the past years. We do have one new project that Director Romaine wanted to add here. That's the hallway wall refinishing. They've been doing some work repainting and removing wallpaper in there, I think on the first floor right now, so she's looking to do it on the second and third floor. Everything else that you see every year is just appropriating some money for the apartment, kitchen, and bathroom remodel projects. We have started the design phase for that with our architect. So that's essentially a placeholder in here. Once we kind of get through the design phase and start bidding some of those out, we'll be able to see how much it's actually going to cost us and see a light at the end of the tunnel for how long it's going to take us to redo 40 apartment kitchens and bathrooms. Any questions on congregate housing?
Council? Seeing none, go ahead.
And the last one's going to be real quick. It's the PU fishery. So we have no projects in there. We do have some money already working there. We have all the materials. We just ordered a bunch of bolts. So we're building all our floats in-house right now with our street staff when they're not working on clearing the roads, which they've been doing a lot of recently. But we're building new floats. We have all the other materials for that, for going out there at the docks. And once we, essentially we'll have a fairly good idea right now how much money we have remaining, and we're planning on using the excess money that we have remaining from that grant to start making some repairs on the concrete down there for the boat launch. And that's what I've got. Any questions?
Thank you. I want to say I appreciate, after all of that, the project schedule breakdown that you have. That's very helpful.
And I should note on that project schedule, the one that was included in the packet, we made a couple revisions. It was just some minor errors I had here and there. So we will have that updated when it actually goes to council for approval.
It'll no doubt continue to change.
Yes,
So,
always.
okay, any questions for Mr. Fry before we let him go? Councilmember Remy, sorry.
I just had a comment, especially in the airport section. I appreciate the amount of grant funding that is being utilized on a lot of these projects, especially when you look at the airport one. The amount of city funding is only slightly more than the amount of grant funding that's being procured. So I just wanted to say I appreciate the fiscal responsibility and the willingness to seek out alternative funding sources for these projects.
And I guess I'll just add on a side note, if I know we have council members that were unable to attend, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or stop by my office and I can help clear up any questions.
Madam Clerk, we don't have anybody online, do we? Okay. Thank you very much. Very good report. City Manager Eubank.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I wanted to add just a couple of things on the capital plan before we move on. First is another reason why we put this plan together is it really guides us in what we will be submitting into our congressional delegation for potential funding at the federal level, but we also use, once it's adopted by council, this is what we'll be putting into CAPSIS, which is the state system, and our opportunity to request state funding and grants to assist with this. I'll let you be the, I'll let you evaluate what the true opportunity is with the CAPSIS system, but we still submit every year. I do think that those funds are few and far between. The other thing I just wanted to stress and say thank you for was that, one, the efforts of Public Works to put this document together, but it really is a culmination of a lot of work from, every department director that has a commission or committee that they work with, bringing these plans before those commissions and committees, having those discussions, finalizing their requests. Those then come, into Public Works and they compile it into this plan. So that's the primary reason we invite all those commission members here tonight, is to say thank you. It is a lot of work and we appreciate their input and their efforts as we move through this. So with that, if we're ready to move on into the budget goals, that where we are, Mr. Mayor?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm going to turn this over to Finance Director Swarner, and we can have a discussion on upcoming budget goals.
Welcome, Mr. Swarner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. So here we are once again. It's that time of the year. Everyone made it through the holidays and on to budget we go. I just want to kind of start out with the broad statement of the purpose of the budget is to prepare and adopt a fiscally responsible budget that meets the needs and priorities of the communities that we serve. We want this to be a responsible budget that ensures the revenues, taxes, and fees are sufficient but not excessive to fund our current operations, but also to look at our long-term maintenance and infrastructure within the city that we use to provide those services. And kind of to talk about that a little bit, one of the things we look at is, one thing I want to talk about today is looking at capital versus operational and how they're funded. Operational cost is what we should be utilizing as we build our budget, to be looking at our expenses and have revenues coming in every year that cover those expenses. And with capital cost or fund balance being utilized to pay for one-time expenses out of fund balance or which capital costs often are. Although they can be recurring as we replace them in time, but from a year-to-year perspective, they're not always in the budget every year. And so as we look at how we utilize fund balance, and that's, we do have a healthy fund balance, and that's a part of why that is because of one-time money we have received during the whole COVID era, if you will. The funds there enabled us to build that balance up to where it's as healthy as it is today. But as we spend those monies, I want to make sure that what we don't do is get into the situation that the state's in, to where they're dipping into their reserves every year to cover their annual expenses. And because it's not sustainable. And that's what we're looking at here with the responsible budget, is to have it be sustainable, that we can do and provide the services year in and year out. So I just wanted to kind of make that clarification on this, because as we put this budget together, we want to make sure that it meets the priorities of all of our essential services, but also non-essential services that we provide throughout the community. And so with that said, I'd like to go ahead and jump into specific goals. And at any point in time, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt and ask. Goal number one, we talk about, again, that operational and long-term financial obligation that we make it sustainable and that we look at our mill rate and our sales tax revenues and the fees and that we charge to make sure that we ensure that fiscal stability, but also that we stay within the guidelines of our fund balance policy that we have at the city. And one of the things there we'll look at is the capacity. For instance, current year budget, we have a capacity of $1.4 million for capital, although we're spending 1.9. So we're gonna dip about 600,000 into that fund balance to cover those capital costs for the year. And that's where we always weigh that into the factors as we build budget and come up with our budget for the year. Number two, we're looking at reviewing the salary schedule. And
I wonder if we could go back to one
Sure.
for just a second. That paragraph's worded a little differently than maybe some previous years, and I appreciate that. I mean, it used to say, we want to maintain this mill rate, or we're going to try to do that, and now it kind of gives a little bit of a leeway that we're going to be looking at that. And frankly, every budget for the last 12 years, I've always held my breath to see what, where we're going to be, with insurance costs going up 10% or more every year, and the cost of everything that we do. And, I think as individuals, we also encounter that, if you're building a house or whatnot. So it would appear that goal number one gives the you a little more flexibility, I suppose, to look to see if changing the sales tax or doing or mill rate or something like that may be necessary. And perhaps it's before you've started the budget to be able to discuss that any farther, but it is a change, and I thought that was noteworthy.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. It's something that we do need to look at that and weigh it into the equation of, do we have the opportunity to adjust that? And it doesn't, it's kind of like when you talk about CPI each year, it's not always going up. There are years where it goes down. I'd be very cautious about that because, like you said, our cost, it seems like everything's just going up exponentially every year. So it is something that I think it's important for us to look at and to weigh, do we have it, do we need to right size this? Kind of one of those things I always say is it's not always how we've been doing things, how should we be doing things, and to review that. And I think that's part of our fiscal responsibility to our citizens is to review that each year and say, is this where it should be? So absolutely. So on to number two. Looking at the salary schedule, pay plan, we'll be working with HR, making sure that we're competitive and comparable to other employers out there in the community, and that we have salary increases that don't exceed inflation. We do rely on that CPI index. I'd say last year it was 2%. We do it based on second half over second half. The first half of this year was at 2.3%. So I am expecting that it's going to land. Often the second half tends to be a little lower. We're expecting that to be somewhere between 1.5% and 2% again this year. And so we won't know that until mid-January here. January 13th is when that number comes out, and we'll take that into consideration as we build budget. Any questions on that one at all?
Any questions? Seeing none, continue, please.
Okay. Number three, we're looking at our benefits side. What do we offer for health, dental, and life insurance benefits to our workforce? And is it sustainable at the current levels, at the quality of coverage that we have for them? One of the things I'll say there that with this one is that this is the Employee Health Fund has grown over the years. In portion, a couple of things that drive that. If we have vacancies, we don't utilize as much as we had budgeted. We've been able to negotiate lower cost. I think in budget last year, I think we had budgeted for an 11.2% increase because that's what we were told. Came down, we were looking at 8%, but I think we negotiated even further. We ended up with dental being 6%, and because we signed early, we got medical down to 4.1%. So we're going to be evaluating that fund, looking at how we kind of curb that growth, and that it benefits the employees and the departments as well as far as costs go in the budget this year. Number 4.
Hey, Dave. Dave, before you move on, I just want to take just a second, Mr. Mayor. I mean, so goal 2 and 3, I think, are really critical. And because I think what that does is that maintains the city's ability to recruit and retain quality employees. I think the city of Kenai has some outstanding employees that do an incredible amount of work. And, you know, goal 2 and 3, I think, gives us the ability to continue to attract and retain them. And yes, it costs money every year to do that, but I think that cost pales in comparison to what it is to try to replace, continually replace people. And so I think council adopting goal 2 and 3 are extremely important. And I just want to say, again, I think we have great employees at the city that do a great job. And I think this will continue to give us the ability to attract other good ones and maintain the ones that we have.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate it. It emphasizes what we're doing there. So, go ahead, Mr. Swarner.
Number 4, we've got looking at cost savings and operational efficiencies. You know, this goal is really just kind of a reinforcement of the culture that we have here at the city. Our department heads and staff are always looking at how we do things better, how essentially we do more with less. But we really want to put that out there and make it that it's part of our culture, and that we kind of keep looking that way and keep reinforcing that's what we're here to do. And then number 5 is compile the list of capital projects. We've pretty well gone through that earlier here today. But with that, you know, capital being anything that's over that $35,000 mark, that is up for council to consider and approve. And you know, the depreciation that we put on here is kind of a benchmark to some extent that we want to be investing. You know, as that much depreciates out of our system each year, we want to be reinvesting that. And so that's, you know, I would say that's more of like a minimum benchmark than anything. And certainly with the way we've seen cost increase over the years, that's always going to be changing, because the equipment we bought 20 years ago and as we replace it now is going to be at a much higher cost. But I think we've got a great capital plan, and that we're on track to do just that. Number 6 is just basically reviewing all our rates, charges, fees that we charge across all the different departments, and looking at keeping that in line with inflation, utilizing the CPI for increases. Kind of note here is we always kind of call out Vintage Point. In the past, we've had some that were grandfathered in and not at market rate. Last year, we did do a market rate study, and we adjusted all rents at Vintage Point to come up to market rate, or in some cases reduced them to market rate. So just, you know, it doesn't always mean an increase. There are times when we actually decrease the rents that we're charging there. If we have a negative CPI year, then they would see a decrease in their rent. So it's not always just increase. There are times when we would decrease it if the CPI dictates that. Number 7 is looking at using the information from that 2025 community survey that we just recently had the presentation on at council. We felt there's a lot of value in that. It highlighted some areas where we're doing things really well. And so we're looking at, okay, we have this high satisfaction rate with our citizens. How do we maintain that? We want that to be part of the budget process of what does it take if they're highly satisfied with Parks and Rec, how do we continue to supply the equipment and keep those facilities maintained where we keep that level of satisfaction with our citizens. But also to look for opportunities where there might be places where we want to increase our scores. Well, what does that look like? And so we want to use that information from that in the budget process here to help us to identify areas to continue that satisfaction, but also look for areas to increase it. And then the final one is previously I talked about our fund balance with the general fund, but this is kind of more fund balances with all of our other funds, with airport fund, water sewer, PU fishery, and the congregate housing. And so we're looking at having the ending fund balance be at least 50% of their budgeted expenditures for the year. And so this is just another benchmark that, as we put together the budget, that we try to hit this goal to keep that sustainable. And again, we kind of talk about the one-time cost or the capital purchases that we do, that we're not utilizing fund balance for operations, that we're looking at these one-time costs. And that's all I had on that, if there's any questions.
Any questions of, I was wondering about the general fund balance, and where we maintain that in general, if that is something that we want to be utilizing for some of these projects, if that's going to be part of the evaluation. And
Yeah, I would say certainly, as we saw, like with the public safety building being such a high expense, how much if we have to do a bond, how much do we do for a bond? Do we maybe utilize some funds out of general fund? We might want to look at that and evaluate that as to what our capacity is to do that. But, at the end of the day, we got to live within that policy of the general fund and keep it healthy and keep it stable. But yeah, I certainly think that we need to maybe look at that and evaluate that at that point in time.
And that might be a question for our city manager, is how we look at that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I think one thing to keep in mind is to look back a little bit. So if you look back at the history of the city's fund balance, we amassed, I'm going to guess, between $4 or $5 million in additional fund balance during the COVID era here at the city, where we had significant resources flowing in from the federal government. City went through a process. We were the first community in Alaska actually to get grants out to businesses to assist them. So we got grants out to our businesses. We used other funding in other allowable ways that resulted in an increase in the city's fund balance. At that time, we had the discussion with council. It was recommended to council at that time we could utilize those funds to kickstart the city's capital plan. So it's about the same time we started formulating a 5-year capital plan and building, capital projections. I think the other thing to really keep in mind too with capital financing in Alaska is the change and the transformation that's happened over the last, say, decade. The traditional model in Alaska, when the oil money from the state was flowing, was communities would develop projects. They would go to Juneau. We would lobby in Juneau. We would come back with our piece of the pie, and we would build our projects. When we needed to, repave a road, when we needed to put a new roof on a building, we'd go down there, we'd lobby, we'd come back, and we'd pay for our money. Those funds aren't existent anymore. So really, I think what communities in Alaska are having to do right now is transition and figure out how to now generate their own revenues to pay for those things that were traditionally paid for with state grants. So you bring all that into kind of context. At the end of the COVID era, council for the last 3 years, Dave, maybe 4 years, through the budget process, has designated or committed a portion of its fund balance that is in excess to its calculated. So we have a minimum and we have a maximum level of fund balance. That's what our policy lays out. We've committed an amount of money in excess of what is the highest limit that we say we should have, and we've committed that to future capital projects. Those funds started out north of $4 million, I want to say, potentially even $5 million. FY26 budget, that commitment was down to about $2.8 million. So we are utilizing our fund balance over time to start. We've really ramped up our capital project funding locally here in the last 3 years. If you look at the 5-year plan that was presented to you tonight, it forecasts approximately $10 million in general fund funding over the next 5 years for projects. As Mr. Swarner stated, our current budget, the FY26 budget here, we had a capacity for about 1.4 million in capital from operations. So so our revenue stream right now can support operations plus about 1.4 million in capital. So we're already utilizing about 600,000 of that a year at that level. If we stick at a $2 million level and operations don't deteriorate that over the next 5 years, that commitment of 2.8 million will be exhausted through the capital process. So I think we are utilizing fund balance in our capital plan every single year. The thing for council to keep in mind is that if past year 5 into year 6 and beyond, if the intent is for the city to continue funding capital projects, beyond what our revenue streams are producing, that's that there's going to be a point where that's not possible anymore. And we're just trying to prepare for that and ease that transition. We also give them the opportunity for other events to happen in the economy that, maybe increase our capacity for capital projects. Things like that, whether that's a gas pipeline that brings a lot of economic activity to town and a lot of, increases our revenue streams. So I think we are looking at ways and utilizing our fund balance. I think council's direction has been relatively conservative, but also very responsible in that process. And so we're going to continue that as we develop the budget this year.
Thank you. I think we're to council comments. So anything on budget or CIP, we'll just cover them both if you want while we have, do you have any questions? Okay, seeing none, brings us to public comments. Are there any members from the public who would like to address the council at this time? Is there anybody online? Buddy? So that brings us to adjournment. Thank you for coming, and thank you very much for the reports.